In this video, we'll be discussing rational exponents as opposed to radical exponents. Now, radical and rational exponents are actually the same thing. They're just written in different forms. So you can actually write a radical expression as a rational exponent. Remember, rational means anything that can be put into a fraction. So the square root of 25 is the same thing as 25 raised to the 1/2. So square root is the same thing as 1/2 of an exponent. Cube root of 8 is saying the same thing as 8 raised to the 1/3. And the fourth root of 81 is the same thing as saying 81 raised to the 1/4 power. Now remember, in the past we have discussed exponent rules that whenever you have two bases that are multiplied, you can add exponents. If you have two bases that are divided, you would subtract exponents. So for example, if you had x to the 4th divided by x to the 3rd, you would subtract. 4 minus 3 is x to the 1. If you have two bases that are both raised to an exponent, then you will multiply. So for example, if I had x squared times y to the 3rd raised to the 5th, that would be x to the 10th, y to the 15th. So if the exponent is on the outside of a parentheses, you will multiply. And then the 0 exponent is the number 1. And if you have a negative exponent, it means it becomes part of the denominator. This is all exponent rules that you learned in Algebra 1. We're going to use this with rational exponents. So if you have a raised to the 1 divided by n, that is the same thing as the index of n. Or you could have two numbers raised to this. So for example, x to the 2/3. The number on top, the 2, is what the exponent power is. The number in the denominator becomes your root. So again, the numerator becomes your power. The denominator becomes the root. Numerator, power, denominator, root. So in this case, we can rewrite it. This is going to be x raised to the power is in the numerator, and the root becomes the denominator. And so that's how you would write x to the 4/5 from the radical expression. So if we wanted to simplify this, what we are doing is we are taking the 5th root of 32 cubed, or you could write it as the 5th root of 32, and then you are raising all of that answer to the 3rd power. These mean the same thing. We could do this second one actually a little bit easier because the 5th root of 32 is the number 2, and so 2 to the 3rd is going to be 8. However, you can actually do the entire thing in the calculator. So if I want to know 32 to the 3rd fifth, or the 3/5, I would do 32 raised. The little house top is going to become the exponent. Make sure you put a parentheses around the 3/5, and then your answer will also still give you 8. 4 to the negative 3/5, if you want to do it by hand, 3/5 is the same thing as 7/2. It's negative, so it's the same thing as saying 1/4 to the 7/2, which is saying 1/4 to the 7th, and the denominator becomes the root. So you would take the square root of 4, which is 2, and then raise it to the 7th power. So 1/2 to the 7th power, which I believe will give you 1 divided by 128. And we are going to check that answer. So in this case, it's 4 raised to the negative 3.5, and it gives you a decimal. And don't forget, if you hit math, enter, it does give you the fraction of 1/128. In this case, you can do the same thing. The index you can divide the index into the exponent. 3 goes into 6, 2 times, and so this is 5xy to the second power. Or you can distribute the 2 and say it'd be 5 squared, which is 25. Please don't say it's 10. It's not 5 times 2. It's 5 raised to the second, which is 25. And then x raised to the second and y raised to the second. So both of these mean the exact same thing. But again, you're taking the index and dividing it into the exponent. Same thing here. This is basically an index of 2. You can divide it in. So 2 goes into 3 one time. So everything that's on the inside is 1 time. And there is 1 left over for the outside. So to simplify these, let's see, in this case, you have a number, you have an exponent outside the parentheses, so you will multiply by the exponent. So 2/3 times -3 is a -2, and a negative exponent means you throw it in the denominator. This next one, same thing, you're going to multiply the exponent on the outside times the exponent, and so you will get x raised to the -8 because 7 goes into 14 twice, so 2 times 4 is -8. A negative exponent means, again, you throw it in the denominator. Down here, I am first going to simplify inside of the parentheses, so 2 minus a -11 is 13. Again, 2 minus a -11 is 13. And then I'm going to raise it to the 1/3 power. So I'll get x to the 13/3. You can write it like that, or I could write it as the cube root of x to the 13th because the denominator becomes the index. And then you can simplify. 3 goes into 13 4 times with 1 left over is going to be your final answer. These are different bases, so you cannot divide or subtract the exponent. You're just going to multiply the 15 times each of these. So 2/3 times 15 is going to be -10 because 3 goes into 15 5 times. 5 times 2 is -10. And then -1/3 and 15 will be a -5. Negative exponents means you have to flip them. So the x is going to go in the denominator, and the y, which is negative, will actually become the numerator now, which will be your final answer. Now for practice, I would like for you to pause the video, attempt these problems, and then resume when you are ready to see the answers. Okay, you have 2 bases that are multiplied, which means you add the exponents. In this case, exponents, add exponents. So you have 2/7 plus 3/14. You need a common denominator, which would give you 4/14 plus 3/14. The 2/7 become 4/14, which becomes 7/14, which becomes 1/2. So this answer is x to the 1/2, or the square root of x. You can write it either way. In this case, I have x's on top and bottom. So since this is division, I can subtract exponents here. 2/3 minus 1/2. So 2/3 minus 1/2 means I need to get it in a common denominator, which is going to be a 6. So this will give me 4/6 minus 3/6. 2/3 is 4/6. 4 minus 3 is 1/6. So this will give me x to the 1/6. And then the y's would be -1/4 minus a -1/2. Common denominator would be 4. So I would be -1/4. 2 negatives give me a positive 2. 1/2 becomes 2/4. -1 and 2 give me 1/4. So it would be y to the 1/4. And that would be your final answer. In this case, you are raising the 1/2 to the exponents. 16 raised to the 1/2. X raised to the 7th because 14 times 1/2 is 7. 81 raised to the 1/2. and then y to the 9th, because 18 times a half is 9. 16 to the 1/2 is the same thing as the square root of 16, which is 4. 81 to the 1/2 is 9. And so that would be your final answer.